You know, people did try to warn me about this one, but I just didn't listen. So here we are, the 10th book in the Wheel of Time series, in what I believe is almost universally considered to be the weakest point in the whole series. And up until this point, I was kind of thinking that people were slightly over-exaggerating how much the quality dipped in these middle books, because, as I said, 8 was kind of weak, 9 had a lot of problems, but it also had a lot of good moments as well. But this one, yeah, I get it now. You know, going into it, I was thinking it can't possibly be as slow as everyone seems to say it is. I mean, how can you really have 600 odd pages where nothing happens? Oh boy, was I wrong. I don't want to spend too much time talking about the plot because there really is very little to talk about. I'd say more than half of the characters in this book, by the end, are in the same place as where they were at the beginning. Perrin is still trying to rescue his wife from the Shido, and she in turn is trying to escape by herself. Matt has finally left Ebu Dar and proceeds to go absolutely nowhere. Elaine is still in Camelin, under siege from a bunch of random nobles who are doing their own scheming amongst themselves I just don't care about at all. We finally catch up with Egwene now, who has actually started her siege on the White Tower. But if you think that means we're going to get, like, actual sieging and battles and stuff, no, that's not going to happen. What we get instead is endless meetings. No, no, it's quite a common criticism of Robert Jordan that his writing style can sometimes be a bit over-explaining things. And that wasn't really a problem for me up until this point. Like, you've got endless scenes of Egwene in meetings with various other sisters, and there could be like 20 other sisters in the room, and Robert Jordan will stop to tell you the name of every single person in that room and what they're wearing, and then every single one of them will have something different to say, and it's just impossible to keep track. Another scene that really emphasized this point for me was early on in the book. There's a scene where Perrin is having a conversation with one of his advisors, Seban Balwa, and he asks him a question, and then we just have like 2 full pages of them walking through the camp with descriptions of the various groups are there and the state of the camp before the other guy finally answers him. Let's talk about Rand. Rand is barely in this book. I don't want to seem like I'm over-exaggerating this point, but he's literally in like 2 chapters of the book where he's recovering from what happened in the previous book and then considering what his next move is going to be, and that's it. Speaking of the ending of the previous book, that was kind of a big thing, right? I mean, the original tainting of Sidene is what caused all the male Aes Sedai to go insane, and that's what caused the breaking of the world. And then, you know, for thousands of years since then, it's created this danger around all male channelers that they would eventually go insane. And that's created this fear and paranoia about the possibility of male channeling. And now that's been undone. That should be a huge world-changing event, but it barely gets a mention at all. Like, I realize that most of the other main characters who don't have male channelers with them aren't going to really know what's happened. Obviously, they're aware that something has happened because of the huge amounts of power that were being used at the time, but they don't really know what it was. So obviously, they're wondering and questioning about that. But even like the people who were with Rand when he did it, like Cadsuane and stuff, they're having conversations among themselves, saying things like, "Yeah, well, the Asherman say that it's been cleansed, but who knows?" And it just seems like they're not really bothered. And then later on, when Logain shows up again, it's kind of mentioned almost in passing that he's noticed that Sidene has been cleansed, but he doesn't believe that Rand was the one responsible. Again, it's treated as if it's nothing when this should be huge. Remember how during the climax of the previous book, a bunch of the Forsaken all turned up, and there were like lots of little bits of information that were dropped about them? And I said it would be really interesting to see what comes next with them, not just who actually survived, but also how would their plans and schemes be affected by what Rand had done. Well, none of them appear in this book. Anyway, let's try and be a bit positive for a minute. Let's see if I can find some good things to say about it. Perrin had one or two good scenes, even though his story didn't really progress at all. There are a few good moments, like that point where he basically tortures a couple Shido for information. It's kind of showing just how far he's really willing to go out of desperation, because he really is becoming totally demented at this point. There was also the scene where he goes into that random ghost town for food and supplies. That was kind of an interesting place that raised a few questions about what exactly was going on there. I'm not entirely sure if we're actually going to get any more of that place, but it would be interesting to see. The stuff with Alvirin in the tower was actually pretty cool. Like, she had been kind of controlling Elida up to this point, then she lost it, and then suddenly out of nowhere the Dark One himself just turns up and marks her. So that was pretty intense. That's all I can really think of. In conclusion, I think all the negative stuff people say about this book is actually accurate. It is boring, it is slow, and very little happens. Honestly, I think it would be possible to skip this one entirely and then just kind of go straight onto book 11 and fill in the gaps yourself. Oh well, I hear it picks up in the next one.